I'm ecstatic to bring together two of my favorite people who I've not interacted with on a show before together, I don't think, and who I
No, first time.
recently realized kind of are familiar with each other IRL, as they say.
That's right.
So I'm happy to welcome back the Crypt Kicker Chad Hawks and Professor Dr. AC. Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC. And we're here to talk about a movie that I rewatched this morning for the first time in 17 years.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Neil Marshall's The Descent. Now, last month, Chad and I talked about Neil Marshall's first film, his breakout film, Dog Soldiers, which I had never seen until I think it was Scream Factory put out a new edition of it. And I loved it. It was one of those, where's this movie been for the last 2 decades? Where have I been for the last 2 decades? Not watching this movie. So then during the course of that discussion, we had mentioned The Descent, which I didn't think much of when I saw it in 2005. But rewatching it this morning, it's like watching an entirely different film. And I have a theory as to why I love it now and didn't love it back in 2005. Now, Chad, I need you to help me out with something because I'm very tired and very old. Did we see The Descent together in 2005 in the theater? I have a recollection that we saw it together.
Well, I'm older than you, so my memory is probably that much worse. I believe we did. I think the only alteration there would be, I think it was a US release in 2006. So
Okay.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
the UK was 2005. So
Right.
other than the year, I'm pretty sure we did. I remember taking it in like when it came out.
Yeah.
So,
Because so it would have been, so thanks for the clarification. It would have been the UK in 2005 and then making its way over here where it was there was a lot of buzz around this movie and I was kind of excited to see it. And I walked out pretty disappointed. And watching it this morning again on my laptop, I think maybe this was your experience, Chad, or maybe I was just in a bad mood or something, or my perception was off, but I feel like whatever theater we were in, like the bulb on the projector was dim or something, because my biggest gripe was I couldn't tell what was going on in half the movie. Like once these explorers get into the cave, it was so dark that it was almost impressionistic, especially during the big battles at the end. But watching it this morning, there was a lot more color and a lot more detail and richness in what I was watching. And I had no trouble telling what was going on aside from some of the deliberate edits where it was like, oh, the character is supposed to be disoriented, so it got a little bit impressionistic. But yeah, I think that makes all the difference. I think the same thing happened when I saw Daredevil, the Ben Affleck movie. I had watched that on Valentine's Day with my wife, and watching it on Siskel and Ebert or whatever incarnation of that was, I think the next day I was like, where was this during the movie? I can actually see what's going on. I think it was the projector bulb because that was a big thing at the time. Theaters would dim the projectors to save on the electricity, and the audience was often none the wiser. They just thought they were watching bad movies, which in the case of Daredevil they were. But anyway, The
I was
Descent.
waiting. I was like, what's the punchline on this one? They say, and I found Daredevil. It's amazing. Have you seen
No.
it? It's so good.
No, because I've seen it. But yeah, so The Descent is it's almost like the flip side version of what Marshall did with Dog Soldiers. That was a film that was like 99% guys kind of trapped in this house fighting off werewolves. There was one woman who kind of shows up in the group. The Descent is 99.9% women, and they are, there's a whitewater rafting or incident in the beginning, and then a car accident that follows, and then we cut to a year later. One of the main character, one of the main characters, Sarah, she lost her husband and young daughter in that horrific car accident, and that she's gone out with this group of women who kind of go adventure seeking, go to different parts of the world to, like go rafting. In this case, they're going to Appalachia to go cave exploring. And, bad things happen because Juno, one of the other people in the group, sort of tricks everybody into going into an actual unexplored cave system that she thought would be more interesting and cool, that they could actually find and name. It could be not just a vacation, but an actual like meaningful, put them on the map kind of a thing. Unfortunately, there's a reason those caves were to the outside world uncharted. It's because they were filled with deadly creatures. So yeah, that's the setup. But I want to kind of rewind the tape a bit and ask the two people who actually liked, from what I understand, The Descent at the time. AC and Chad, tell me, what was it about The Descent that really turned you on? Not turned you on. I'm not trying to say because it's a movie full of women. I'm talking about like just as a film.
Although I will say, because it was a movie full of women, I found that really interesting and engaging, because you could totally see this being, I mean, it is very much kind of like a deliverance tale, where you have a group of friends going off into the wilderness and testing themselves against nature and bonding over that. And I really liked that we got to see a group of women doing that. I thought, like, and of course, coming out of it, you're like, why don't we see that more often? Like, why don't we see groups of women doing things and have a horror movie or an action movie around that? Why does it always got to be a sausage party? And so that was one of the things that actually did really appeal to me. And I had seen Dog Soldiers at that point, and so I was down for anything Neil Marshall had to bring to the table. And like you, I'd heard a lot of buzz about it. Like, it was on the cover of Fango and Rue Morgue, and I was like, okay, this is the one. This is the one. And I hadn't heard yet about that we were getting a different ending in the US than in the UK. And I remember thinking the ending was like, like, I mean, you throw in one last scare, that's okay, fine. But then you find out, oh no, that's actually meant to be a false scare, and that there's something far more dread-inducing to follow. So there was a lot of things that I appreciated, but I still have a few quibbles that I'm happy to discuss later. But overall, my impression was pretty positive.
Yes, and I do want to talk about that ending, because I don't know if I've seen that. The UK version, I mean. But we'll get into that after. Chad, tell me what you made of it. We saw this. I'm convinced we saw this together. I'm surprised you're still talking to me, because when I don't like a movie, as we can testify with that James Bond film we went to go see in Minnesota, where I feel like I almost got us kicked out of the restaurant because I was yelling about how terrible it was. But yeah, tell me about your impressions of The Descent.
Just, I am drawn to it because I think I marked the clock at 1 hour into the film before you see the first monster, the crawlers. They've been dubbed. And but the movie, for me, it doesn't lack any scare, any buildup. The character development is just phenomenal. And it's a movie, really, as the kids say, if you know, you know, hashtag, because there's so many subtleties built in, and the monsters are almost secondary to the real monsters, which are human nature and human relationships. And you mentioned right in the intro, there's a whitewater rafting scene, and the camera work, the editing, the soundscape, all of these things come together just to make, from second one, you just get tense, because you're like, even though it's, this group of women kind of in their heyday when they would get together and go do adventurous things, you don't know that. You just see a bunch of people in quick cuts, a lot of noise. There's a little kid on the shore that yells for mummy, and it's not exactly, you can't quite read it. There's just a lot of tension right from the first moment, and it doesn't let up until we're in the car driving, and it's the main character, her husband, and her child. They're right in the middle of a conversation, and the most legitimate jump scare ever auto accident. It's true to life horror. And then we follow that with a little bit of a nightmare moment where the main character is, we assume she's unconscious. She comes conscious and she's in a hospital and she's lost everything in her life. So I think the film at its heart is really, it depends on empathy. And I've heard a lot of people who absolutely hate it because you don't get monsters until an hour in to, I think it's what it clocks in about an hour 40, maybe.
Yeah, just
somewhere around there. So half a movie, we don't get the monsters, and a lot of people criticize it, but to those folks, I'm like, maybe you missed all of the tension, and there are great jump scares built in there throughout the whole thing, but they're so well integrated into what's happening. I just adore it.
Well,
And the fact that it is I'll say, like, all the main characters are female. We only, let's see, we only see the husband. That's the only guy in the film.
Yeah, you see him
And-
like literally within the first 5 minutes, and he's not even really part of that. He like says, "I'll take, I'll get Jesse into the car," or something like that. And
Yeah,
there's some knowing looks on Juno's face, which kind of sets up some of the tension later in the movie. But yeah, he's just kind of a non-entity. He's backstory. He's a personification of backstory.
right. And there's just so much going on in the film. I just have always enjoyed it, and it would be an exaggeration to say every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. But even this far away from its release, new ideas still come to me, and I'll bring up some of those kind of as we're wrapping up. That because it's a thinking person's movie. It really is. You have to be a thinking person, appreciate subtleties that you're catching, as well as emotional cues.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, Chad, I mean, like, we're talking about that first hour. Yes, there's character development. Yes, there's human relationships, but also it's claustrophobic as hell. And I mean, if you can't find some real life horror in that, of like being stuck in a cave, that in its own is like, sorry, I don't want to be in that situation. I find that horrifying. I find that scary. And I'm like, now, yes, I mean, I saw the cover of Fango, so I know there's a monster coming, but just on its own, the idea that your friend basically doesn't give you enough information to make an informed decision, takes you down and is going to maybe trap you to death in a cave. And you're like, what do you do with that? I mean, I found that just fascinating, and I was completely engaged the whole time. And then the monsters show up and you're like, and it just got worse. Awesome. Well done, Neil.
Worse or better,
Right.
Of both. Worse for them, better for us.
It's also got one of the best, I think, exposition, most well-integrated exposition dumps I've seen ever in a movie, because as they're kind of trotting down this path, they spend the night in a cabin, and then they take the long walk into the cave system. And as they're doing that, I think they're crossing a river. One of them starts talking about, and here's what you could expect to experience. You got to watch out for this when you go in, cave diving. Claustrophobia, hallucinations, hyperventilate, like all of this stuff. So you get that out of the way. It's almost, throwaway. So by the time you get into the film, it's almost a cue to the audience. Okay, here's when you start panicking and hyperventilating. Here's what the characters are thinking about. This is a horror movie, so anyone could be expendable. So you don't know if this is going to be the cave-in that collapses somebody, or if it's just the inciting incident. Honestly, I think the success of this movie, I understand where you're coming from, Chad, as far as, hearing negative things from people like, it's a monster movie, where are the monsters? This thing succeeds, and I think is almost more interesting if you take the monsters out. You don't need to add that element to it. It's bad enough being trapped in a cave system that is, to their knowledge, unexplored. And how do they get out? And they get these little glimmers of hope. They see some cave drawings of, okay, here's, whoever was here a long time ago drew the mountain, and then they drew two cave, one on this side and one on the other. If we can just get across, maybe we can find our way around to where it's not caved in and get out. And then it's after that that they discover that they're not alone down there. The monsters themselves, they're very, maybe it was because I had Guillermo del Toro's Blade 2 and for that matter Blade 1 in my head. They kind of reminded me of modern day, vampire, Nosferatu inspired vampire creatures, kind of gray. They've got like messed up eyes and those jagged front teeth. I don't know if they're supposed to be vampires, but I don't know if they're not supposed to be vampires.
Well, they do. They're supposed to be blind and evolve to use sound. We're never really. Apparently, there's no olfactory evolutionary heightened abilities that they have as monsters, because there's many times when they're really close to somebody that would smell completely off from what you would find in a cave. So, and that is one of my only quibbles with the film, is that we do have a little bit of monster downplay in order, like at sometimes they have this awesome clicking, almost a predator click that they use to echolocate. Well, for creatures that use this to survive and hunt, they're kind of horrible at it at times, just so that we can, we're not killing off everybody like that. There are definitely times when they're right on top of somebody,
literally
face to face.
Well, no, like there's literally a time where like he puts his hand on her head, and I'm like, there is no way that creature thinks that that's a rock. I mean, like,
or a skull,
or
there's going to be heat coming off of her.
Like, come on. That was like, if I had a quibble, that was it. I was like going, wait, like they're so good at this, and then they're not good at it at all, and it feels a little convenient. But I had enough goodwill built up by then that I was willing to go along with it.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, I'll let that one slide.
Yeah, exactly.
See, here's, I'm gonna put this down to Neil Marshall's talents as a filmmaker. None of that occurred to me until you guys brought it up. I was so freaked out about, like, oh my God, is she gonna move the wrong way? And and there's that whole bit with the watch, which is set up. It's a fancy alarm watch that goes off at an exact inopportune time. And how are they going to get out of this? And of course, she rips it off and throws it. But you always wonder, is that going to work in the moment? There's a lot of setup and payoff here. The thing with the guidebook, that Juno leaves it in the truck because, well, it wouldn't do them much good because it wasn't even the proper caves that they were in. But it reminded me of, I feel like Neil Marshall watched the Blair Witch Project and that stupid thing they did with throwing the map away, and said, I'm actually going to make this whole thing work, because that was an idea that was horribly executed. This is a way to make it work for the story and kind of make it a terrifying double punch. Like, not only did she leave it in the truck, they're not even in the right cave.
Right. And that's one of those great subtleties where it's one of those 10-second throwaway scenes where if you don't catch it, if you're digging around for popcorn or something, you're going to miss it. But it foreshadows, it causes you to question that character. It's not two idiot teenagers in the middle of the woods arguing over a map and they toss it in a creek. I mean, that just completely killed any empathy and any enjoyment for that film I might have had from that point on. Whereas this, it just makes you wonder, like, whoa, okay. And there's plenty of other clues, like the long hike and you would think the way they talk, or the way she's talked about this cave as being a starter cave, it's almost touristy, that you're going to have a short walk, probably an established parking area, an established trail. Like, there's all of these little clues that they're subtle, they're there. It just makes it that much tastier when you realize, oh, I was given all the information.
You don't like it when Mike kicks the map in the river?
No. That's a whole nother show.
You just made my brain freeze thinking about how awful that was. But I also want to talk about, because you mentioned it's not teenagers in the woods. I think it's very key that these are adult women. I mean, we figure they're all in their 20s, but like one is about to graduate medical school. The other is, a mom who had probably a 6 or 7 year old daughter and a husband, like in an actual, like a life, right? I feel like if this were a dead teenager movie, when Juno had revealed the thing about the book, at least two of the other people would have been like scrapping and fighting, and it would have devolved into this thing. But they are all like, yeah, they get emotional about it. They're like, we've got to just figure out how the hell to get out of here. We'll deal with we'll deal with Juno later once we're safely out of this cave, but we're short on, light, oxygen, time. It's yeah, it's a very smart film. And I do want to talk about the characters, because I think they're all, even though we don't get like full backstories and rich depth in all of them, they all do feel like real people. And what is it about these characters, I think, that I want to get your feeling on it. They are female characters. They're strong, female leads, which is something that we've, in the last like 6, 7 years, there's been a lot of outcry, like, where are all the strong female characters in movies? What is it about these women, do you think, that Neil Marshall is able to capture? I don't know anything about the writing or the production or the creation of this movie, but it seems like such a crazy feat that a guy can write, what, 6 female characters and really tap into something that doesn't feel like pandering, it doesn't feel inauthentic, and it doesn't feel like he wrote for guys but cast women. What's the magic there, do you think?
Well, I mean, I did watch some of the backstory features and things like that, and it does sound like he had a rough, screenplay, but it was kind of like sketched in caricatures of women, and then the women actually helped during like workshopping of getting something that felt organic and something that felt genuinely feminine, but not kind of like feminine with a capital F, where it's like imposed upon it. It's
So you're
like
saying,
these.
so like Marshall's first draft was they all get stuck in a giant kitchen and they have to make their way out. Is that what you mean by caricatures?
Perfect. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And he was, but he was very much about like, and it sounds like this is Marshall, his process is that it's a very collaborative one. He has a vision as to what he's looking for, but he's got the feelers are open to anybody who has a better idea, and the best idea wins. Like that's what goes on screen. And I think that's kind of how he developed these characters, is he allowed the females who were playing these characters to develop them with him, for him, etc.
And they each, you can really, I think for me, the character that was sort of the most vague might have been Beth, the little sister. There are two sisters, Beth and Rebecca, Rebecca being the older sister. And Rebecca is where you get a lot of that exposition, because her character is very much kind of the henpecker. She is reminding everyone of the safety protocols, making sure that everyone is prepared. Have you drank any water? And there's so much depth there, because all of these characters are very believable, and you really get the sense that these actors are taking something from themselves, something from their lives or people they've known intimately, and portraying a real dimensional human being. And but again, this is a point in time where they haven't done this together, and I think it's about 10 years or so. So they're getting back together, and you've also got the awkwardness of our friend experienced the worst tragedy you can go through. She lost her daughter and her husband in a single day, and she's obviously still just grief stricken, has never gotten over this, as one can expect. And people are still reacting around that. So it's just, there's so much depth and reality there, I think, especially in the cabin when we're kind of digging into it's, they're just there. They just have to stay there the night. So of course they're talking, laughing, a little bit of awkwardness, but you really get a lot of those characters, and all of them are smart. We've got the Holly character, who is the newest to the scene. Right. Juno is kind of taken her on as an apprentice, daredevil, which Juno presents herself kind of as like, hey, I'm still doing this. I know you guys have all gone away and done your life, but I'm still very much in this athletic, outdoorsy, I'm going to do anything for a dare type thing, and has brought along a little protege. Mm-hmm. Who, she's such a character herself, but everybody's believable and smart to an extent. And when they're not, again, this Holly character, at some point, her youthful hubris winds up casting her literal fall from being a very good athletic person and potentially an advantage in this situation to being she falls because she's not listening to what these other experienced people are telling her. She breaks her leg, a compound fracture, which is also horrifying just to see. And but she's then a liability. Right. And that process of writing those characters really works, like calling on the actors themselves to bring something to the table and bring something to their character. I think it's great.
Well, you mentioned, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You mentioned the sisters. I think it's Sam and Rebecca. I think that are the sisters. Sam is the medical student. And
right.
Because
Beth is the one who gets it in the neck, right?
Right. And yeah. I found like there's times, I mean, thank goodness that, Saskia Mulder, who plays Rebecca, the elder sister, that she has such a strong accent, because I kept getting her and Beth mixed up once they had their helmets on, because Alex Reed has dark hair and Saskia Mulder has the blonde hair. But once they had their helmets on, I'm like, wait, who's who? Because Norjane Noon, who plays Holly, like she has such distinctive facial characteristics, and Juno is very easy to pick out. Sarah, like she's somebody you can eventually, like, she looks a lot like Rebecca at times. Yeah. So it's like, I was kind of like, who's who? Because this time around, I was trying to, like, in anticipation for the show, I'm like, okay, who's who? And I'm like, man, it's really hard to keep track of the blondes. And it's like, thank goodness Sam is small and cute. And then there's Norjane Noon, who's like got this great eyebrows and mouth. And then Natalie Mendoza, has a kind of an ethnic quality to her. So it's like, okay. And she's also got like the Burt Reynolds in Deliverance, sleeveless vest going. And I'm like, okay, you got to love a show that's going to let you show off your guns.
Well, here's the thing about Juno, and this is something I'd forgotten. I knew that there was the, affair angle with Sarah's husband, Paul, which is, I'd forgotten how subtly this was kind of realized in the movie, and that there wasn't some kind of a big, not to say cat fight, but a big calling out like, you slept with my husband and how could you? I mean, it's all basically implied. And the key is on this, is it a little feather, kind of like a trinket that says love every day, necklace, that was Paul's, that Beth gets off of Juno, if I recall correctly, because at one point Juno is attacked by one of the creatures and she's beating the hell out of it with one of the pickaxes. And it's the classic thing of, although this is kind of Beth's fault, because if she wanders into a scene where her friend she's probably come into the end of her ravaging this monster with a pickaxe, that's not the time to tap her on the shoulder or whatever she does, because Juno swings around and axe right through the front of the throat, and Juno leaves her there to die. And this is sort of horror movie logic too, because we catch up with Beth later and I'm like, I don't know how long she was lying there on the ground, with this giant gaping hole in her throat, but I'm pretty sure she would have checked out by then. But anyhow, Sarah later discovers this trinket that Beth had said, or Beth gives it to her and says, I got this off of Juno, or as it would have been. So yeah, the truth eventually comes out, but it is done in such a way that, again, it's a movie for adults. You don't have to resort to, cliche or overwrought or overwritten drama to get the point across. But Juno, earlier on in the film, before we know anything about the infidelity, she's sort of painted as, is she going to be the final girl? Because she's tough, she's resourceful. We follow her like jogging through the woods before going to wake everybody up. She's kind of a cheerful character. She's not really villainous. That is sort of revealed over the course of the movie. But having forgotten a lot of this film, I couldn't recall, okay, is Juno the one that survives or is it Sarah? Because this whole thing is setting up for, we're following Sarah's trauma. It's almost like the Janet Leigh thing from Psycho, but instead of getting rid of the protagonist in the first 15 minutes, we're going to let her go all the way up to the end, and then she dies, then Juno survives.
Yeah, I mean, well, Juno definitely presents herself as the most resourceful, like, and again, very similar to Burt Reynolds in Deliverance. Like I think those comparisons are deliberate, and we see the most capable person, and then because we think, okay, well, if anybody's going to survive, it's going to be that person, and then something happens.
Yeah. Now back to Holly, Chad, I think you're absolutely right. She's got this hubris that drive, she's, kind of a daredevil and a go-getter. I think she wants to impress this group of women that she's with, especially by, calling them like tourist caves. I'm so over this. I could do this in my sleep. But yet when she thinks she sees daylight, she, in one of the cave systems, she's running and crawling through it and pursuing it. Then she falls into this hole. But it's not in a way that it's a stupid character thing in a horror movie. At this point, she's driven, I think, on pure instinct to survive. She's chasing it. She is sure that this has to be daylight. There can be no other explanation. And as an audience member, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, it's daylight. What other explanation could there be? Turns out there's, what is it, phosphorus reflecting in the rocks, which I feel like maybe comes into play later in some of the color schemes and the lighting that happens in later scenes, because we get these giant orange glow sticks and then the orange reflection off some of the headlights that kind of blend together to completely light up scenes that I don't know that either of those things combined would have been able to do on their own. I wonder if it was some of that reflective rock.
Possibly. I think I was going to comment on this earlier when you were talking about the first showing being so dark that you couldn't see what was happening. And that's always, it's tough to shoot a film that is meant to be in pitch black, and I that possibly could have been a frequently heard complaint with this film, because the sequel, which does and does not deserve its own show, maybe discussion, it goes in the complete opposite direction, where everything is like they just brought stage lights in and there's no accounting for what a cave environment is actually like.
Right.
And so I think that the crew of The Descent did a fantastic job of finding a good, maybe it could have been a little bit more, and then even with a dim bulb in a theater, you would have seen more of it. But when you're watching it, on a laptop or a TV off DVD quality, I think it hits just the right amount where you don't realize, I don't find myself questioning like, oh, that's a lot of light. I just kind of go along with it. And then, like you said, there are some scenes that are really dark, but along with that topic, just some shout outs to the crew. First and foremost, the editor, I think it was Dan Harris. I'm not sure where my notes went, but John Harris, I'm sorry. He, as we know, Marshall wrote and directed this, but in his upbringing into film was largely through editing. And the editing in this film is so pristine and so precise and works so well that I wonder how that worked, where if you have a master editor you're working for and you're trying to realize their vision while also expressing your own artistic uh, abilities while you're creating this film. I don't know if that would have been hard. I'm guessing that seems like Neil Marshall is great to work with. So hopefully that was just a beautiful union of thoughts and creativity there, but super impressive editing. And on the soundscape, the sounds are so underplayed, but yet so critical to this film. You know, like I mentioned, just right from the opening, the combination of the water and the screaming of people having fun, yet they're not quite having, you can't tell. It's, you know, everything throughout the film is designed to really just tense you up and not know what's coming next. If you're going to get another real life horror moment, or if you're going to get a monster moment. And then the colorscapes. We have a lot of bleak colors throughout the entire introduction. Anything outdoors is very bleak. Nothing is sunny. It all kind of helps to set that dreadful tone. But then as soon as we get inside the caves, we do start to get some color, which is kind of an interesting choice, because whereas we could see them as bleak, we actually get the most color schemes in the cave system with the monsters.
Right.
We get a lot of reds and a lot of warm hues, and it's fascinating, but it all works and it's all gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam McCurdy, who did the cinematography, he's been Neil's kind of go-to guy since his early short film Combat. But he did Combat, he did Dog Soldiers, he did Doomsday, he did this one, he did Centurion, he did the Game of Thrones episode. Like he's Neil's buddy. And
Okay.
What's his name? Who did the production design? Simon Bowles. I mean, I was knocked out. They did basically like that entire film is shot on has 6 caves that just get redressed and redressed and redressed it's like a Hammer production. You know, it's like what, like that's okay. That's the same one. It's just tilted up on its side and it has a few more stalactites on there. And then they clear it off and they make it dry and then they make it wet. And it's like, oh my God, like
Wow.
that was an amazing like featurette of them just talking about all the ways they were reusing the same, like the way they built the big pit that she falls into. That's basically like a bathtub. You know, like it's all built around. It's like, you know, like an inch thick of water. And then there's one section that she can be in because they were working. They had more money than they had for Dog Soldiers, but it was not a lot of money still. And so they were having to be very, very creative. And like, you know, the creatures, the crawlers, you know, like those poor guys. Paul Hyatt was the special effects guy on that. And it took like, you know, between 3 to 5 hours for every single crawler every single day.
Oof. What I watched, I pulled this up on Amazon this morning. Of course, they've got a little pop-up trivia, you know, if you move your mouse. One of the things I read on there was that Marshall insists on hiring actors and not stunt people
Right.
For the parts of the crawlers because he wanted them to be actual characters.
Yeah.
You know, to create a believable, you know, creature, a believable life form, and have a story to tell, even though we don't get a lot of exposition about what they are, you know, how they've survived down there that long. You know, it's interesting. We do see, like, at one point, I think there's a what we can read to be a female version of one, because the one that has like long black hair, the others are kind of like these bald Nosferatu looking guys. But, you know, as far as the, you know, the kind of the claustrophobia and the actual production creation of this, usually when I'm pulled out of a movie to think about how it's being made, that can be a bad thing. But in the case of The Descent this morning, I was thinking about particularly the initial bit where Sarah is crawling through that passage and she gets stuck, and that sort of leads to the cave in. I was thinking about, was this thing shot in an actual cave? Because it feels
Mhm.
like it was. How did
Right.
they get the equipment down there? Were the
Right.
people who are making this freaked out? I'm freaked out because I'm imagining the actress, if there's anything like being in that situation while making this scene, I'd start hyperventilating too. When it's
Yeah.
is it I think it's Beth that goes, is it Beth that goes back to get Sarah? Was that right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. She's trying to talk her down and tell her a joke and everything, but I'm immediately in Sarah's spot. I'm like, if I'm stuck here and we're all stuck here and there's a possibility we're never getting out, how do you calm yourself down from that?
Right. Right.
It's so effective. Growing up as a feral child out in the middle of nowhere, we had old logging town remains, and some of the structures had these inexplicable holes through enormous chunks of stone. Like, as we grew up and later learned, they were counterbalances
Hmm.
for something or another. But I would wiggle through things or try, and there have been moments in my life. I later went on to uh, actually do some spelunking, not super hardcore, but just caves are amazing. And but they captured that, everything about that, where all of a sudden your entire world is the 4 square feet around your head, and you become every dust mote, every time you breathe, the audio is perfect. You're surrounded by earth, and you suddenly realize how much you're inside the earth, and if something does go wrong, you're insignificant. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just squish. And it's
If you're lucky, I mean, because you could get, trapped in the middle of things that get squished,
yeah,
and you suffocate there in complete darkness, and yeah, it's
suffocate, dehydrate, starve. I mean,
Hmm.
caving is, with the character, as we're approaching the cave, just going through all of these safety checks. It's
Yeah.
like, these are not stupid people. Like, they're experienced, and they've also done some research, and it just proves that. um I look at movies. I can't remember where I was exposed to this, but human versus what? It's going to be something. And there's so much human versus nature
Hmm.
in this, as well as human versus human, that just makes it so compelling. But the human versus nature aspects are so realistic that even people that are well either experienced or well equipped, a good combination of both, things go wrong. And when we've got a little bit of betrayal in there on top of that, and you're in a panic situation under the earth, I don't know how people can enjoy that or
Yeah.
empathize with, like, oh my God, yeah, what would I do?
Well, you
well, and
talk
that's
about, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was watching Jurassic Park with my youngest this weekend, and I think about the Muldoon character, who's like this, he's brought on to be an advisor and a wrangler for these dangerous dinosaurs because he's one of the most badass hunter on the planet, and he comes up against velociraptors. So it's like if something scares him, I know I'd be doubly dead. The same thing with the colonial marines from Aliens, let's say. So I think having an entire crew of people, now these aren't like all badass combat veteran, cave spelunkers, but they are, I keep saying, they're adults. They're very resourceful, very smart people. So to see them be put in a situation where they do panic and kind of revert back to their primal scared human selves, it makes it doubly concerning, because I know myself, I would have had a heart attack the second I got stuck anywhere in that cave.
Well,
But
I
AC,
mean,
you're gonna say.
well, just to kind of follow up Chad's feral child, uh, because I tend to be somebody who I tend to be an explorer. So when I'm somewhere I haven't been before, I will just kind of wander, and nobody knows where I'm at because I don't know where I'm going. So the idea of like, well, you're going to let anybody know where you're going? Like, I don't know where I'm going. I'm going to go find, what I find. And there have been many times, where you're talking about being stuck places. I'm like, there have been many times I'm like, I'm lost and nobody knows where I'm at. and I'm probably going to die here. Let me just wander in circles until I find something that looks familiar. So I relate very much to, like, the whole Blair Witch thing. I'm like going, oh no, I could totally get lost in, like, 1 acre. I can make that happen. Watch this.
When I was a kid, a couple of times I would lose the remote to the TV. Complete panic. I was just in my living room. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to go on. Yeah, I have to get up and go change the channel manually. So terrifying. But
I
no,
do want I want to make quick mention to our crawler, our main crawler, Scar, because that's played by Craig Conway. You talked about them being played by actors. Craig Conway is our first guy we meet in Dog Soldiers, who's camping with his girlfriend.
Oh,
The one that she gives him the silver dagger.
wow.
That is Craig Conway, and he's our main crawler guy.
that's so fantastic. A little
Yeah.
familiarity there. Just be like, we know you.
Even though it looks completely different now. But so I do want to ask, because we're kind of coming up on the hour here, a couple of things I want to get to. One, the alternate ending, or I guess the original ending. And two, Chad, you said that early on that you've seen this film a few times, and there's maybe some things that you've picked up on that maybe you didn't appreciate in earlier viewings. Tell me about some of that.
Okay, well, it goes along with the ending, the actual ending, because we're tender pink Americans that can't handle the dread of Sarah actually hallucinating the escape scene, waking up back in the cave, and then proceeding to hallucinate about her daughter's birthday, which is a recurring hallucination throughout the whole film. I wrote down the 16-minute mark. It just sounds very early, but when we're at the cabin, everybody has left the cabin, and there's a final, I'm not sure if it's a pan or if it's just a static shot as Sarah leaves her room. There's a bottle of her medication that she does not take with her.
Right.
And this is very easy to disprove. There's, and you really have to kind of squint to see this perspective. But I just, at some point, and I've seen it a couple more times. It's my number one favorite horror film because of the intelligence behind it. So I've watched it a lot, and I force friends and family to watch it with me. So, but at some point I thought, what if there were no monsters? What if Sarah was the monster? And because her lack of medication, just everything she's gone through in her life, in her adult life, she was the monster. And we're shown first person that there are monsters, but it's just a fun, I just went, oh yeah, that kind of that one bottle scene.
Yep.
And we do get Sarah being the first person she hears giggling, she sees a crawler off a ways through a complex that disappears. Nobody believes her. They all treat her like, oh, sweetheart, you're kind of crazy. Let's not be crazy right now. We've got other things to worry about. So it does play into that a little bit. It's just a fun way to watch it the next time you do watch it, as, oh, what if? And then, of course, the sequel makes all of that. Unfortunately, you can't even pretend, but
Nope.
So is that theory that she goes into the caves with her friends and just kills all of them? She goes crazy?
That is my crackpot theory of, even though I know that's not the case, and it's a beautiful movie the way it is, there's so many moments throughout that allow you to kind of ponder and think of other realities. And since she is hallucinating so much throughout, it just struck me like, oh, obviously she's got something against Juno, but if she were out of her mind enough of a psychic break, she might have hurt the people that loved her most and not been in her right mind. And only later, when she's talking to Beth, who's got the throat wound and is near death, and she asks her to, like, please do me in, and it obviously changes some scenes from what she would have been interpreting and what we were shown to, but it's just a fun theory. Like I said, totally crackpot.
The alternate or the original ending, you mentioned that, so Sarah imagines, she hallucinates that she gets out of the cave and she actually wakes up back in the cave. Is that
How
and
did your
she's
movie,
stuck
how
there?
did your movie end, Ian?
It's the same one that I saw, that I remember seeing in 2006 or whatever. Sarah basically cripples Juno by slamming the or stabbing her with the pickaxe in the leg, and then Juno gets surrounded by the monsters. Sarah escapes with one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, of her crawling up these skulls, but it's basically a black screen. You can see her, and she's crawling up a shaft of light.
Yep.
Again, it's very artistic. She gets out, she's screaming, she's running around the woods, she comes right to their truck. So the whole joke was like, yeah, they were like 10 feet away from their vehicle, or they worked their way around. She drives, she pulls over, vomits, and then when she gets back, she pulls herself back up into the driver's seat. Phantom ghost Juno is like sitting in the passenger seat, just kind of looking at her, and she screams, and cut to black.
That's the version you saw this morning
Yeah.
on Amazon?
Mm-hmm.
That's some bullshit, Amazon.
Yeah.
Which version was that? The American
That's the
version?
US version, which I was like,
Yeah.
we've done away with that by now, right? But apparently not.
Mm.
So
Okay,
yes, that was the US theatrical version. And
Okay.
basically what happens is, after she sees Phantom Juno, that shocks her back into the cave. And we realize, oh, her whole escape was a hallucination. And then she has an image of the birthday cake and her daughter on the other side. And then the camera pans and we see that she's looking at nothing. So she's hallucinating her daughter and the birthday cake. It's just a torch that's burning on the ground. And we hear the clicking of the crawlers coming closer and closer. And then we fade to black, which is a much creepier ending. And you can find it on YouTube. And I'm Amazon. Come on, guys. Bad show.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to definitely look that up, because it does sound, I mean, I liked the ending, in the truck, because I think the ghost Juno was sufficiently creepy, and I think it also speaks to, Juno, yes, she was a villain in the sense that she did sleep with her best friend's husband.
Yep.
We don't know exactly what that whole relationship was about. I did like the whole idea of the group was kind of angry at Juno because she left abruptly, like right after the accident. And you realize that, yeah, because her boyfriend, even though it's her best friend's husband or whatever, had just been horribly killed in this car accident. So she was traumatized by the whole situation too. And she can't talk about it or express her feelings in the same way that Sarah can, because she's the mistress. But so, and later on, yes, she does kill Beth and leave her there to die. But again, with a lot of these conversations about instinct and survival, you're like, okay, if she figures Beth is, she's got this gaping throat wound and there's monsters everywhere, what is she really going to do? She's going to be a liability. Yeah, Juno is painted as kind of the bad guy here. But when Sarah deliberately takes that opportunity at the end to, essentially murder her friend and leave her to be, albino monster food, that's the true, I think, villainous act. And I think seeing Juno, that phantom version of her, is another form of guilt that she's going to be thinking about, along with spikes coming at her, reliving that car accident for the rest of her life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that was the thinking behind the US ending, is that this is, yes, it's kind of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre ending, in that, yes, she's escaped, but she's going to be haunted for the rest of her life. She's going to be scarred for the rest of her life. but there's something about the downbeat ending of the UK version that says, oh, like how, you know, how sad and yet how beautiful that her last moments, at least in her mind, are with her daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
She's finding that piece, and sorry, my camera is completely out of focus here.
It's just descending, that's all.
That's right.
Exactly. And it does open up that question of, well, then she didn't encounter Juno, so you know, and she didn't get out of the cave to see everyone else
Right.
and what their fate was. So we don't really know. I mean, we do know what happened to everyone except Juno. And there we are.
And there you are.
Yeah.
One last sorry, just one last question. This goes back to the beginning, to that car accident, which I think was a really well done scene, except we kind of pan out with this great aerial shot of the two cars that have been, you know, completely messed up. It looked like, I don't know if this was supposed to be oil, but it looked awfully red to me. It looked like there was a pool of blood coming out from underneath, you know, Sarah's family's van. That wouldn't have been a thing, because I mean, the spike went through the passenger, like through the window, essentially impaling the husband and we imagine the daughter, but I don't think that seeps, like, it's not like the daughter was underneath the van and then got impaled and then the blood pulled out. What was going on with that?
I mean, unless they don't seal the undercarriage of the vehicle.
There you go.
In Britain, then yeah, there wouldn't have been any way.
It's like a Fred Flintstone car where just there is no bottom of the there's no floorboard.
I think I've written, I appreciate the fact that it could be interpreted as blood, but I've always assumed that one of the pipes went through the engine block and that's oil, you know, or maybe the oil pan got knocked off or something. So,
well, speaking of pipe, as we close out here tonight, after we talked about Dog Soldiers, Chad, you had recommended a book called Sausages: The Making of Dog Soldiers by Janine Pipe. And this was not a bit that we set up. It's pure coincidence. I'm just taking advantage. But yeah, I'm barely scratched the surface of this thing, but you know, folks out there, you can order this off of Amazon. From what I understand, it was a Kickstarter book, but now there's a commercially available version of it. It is written, what I love about it is written from a true fan's perspective, with input from Neil Marshall, and there's interviews with like everybody involved in the making of the movie. It's such a wonderful book. I'm actually going to leave a link to it in the show notes here, so you can check it out. I don't know if there's information in here about the descent or anything that Marshall did afterwards, but if you want to know about like what it takes to put together a movie and the long, arduous process, and what a magical thing it can be to find like your people, as we mentioned, a lot of his crew came up from his short film through Dog Soldiers and on to like the big Hollywood productions. It's a really inspiring book. So yeah, thank you for recommending it, Chad.
That's cool.
Glad you're enjoying it.
I wouldn't give Amazon a dime after they just like ripped you off of like, you know, the best 2 minutes of the movie.
That is look, super unfortunate.
Hey, the way I look at it is, I told you guys the ending that I watched, and you gave me this beautiful theater of the mind experience. I'm not even going to watch the original ending on YouTube. I've already seen it, the better version, the best version. No, but thanks guys for talking not Dog Soldiers, The Descent, 2 D movies,
Happy to
A+
talk
movies.
Soldiers anytime.
All right, we'll have to do a second one. If they make Dog Soldiers 2, we'll do a feature on that and The Descent 2. Oof. Wait, is The Descent 2 actually related to this? Does like
God,
come
yes,
back and go?
It is a direct sequel.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I won't say anything about it because it would quote spoil Descent 2, which is a tall order.
I'll tell you this: there's a dog in it. I love the dog.
Is that dog a soldier though? But anyhow, yeah, we might have to talk about that on a future show because I'm intrigued and also horrified. But yeah, thanks guys for taking the time to talk about The Descent, a movie that I now appreciate way more than I did seeing it in the theater. I watched it on a laptop and got claustrophobic. So yes, here's a clue. I'll try and find the timestamp. Rent the movie or own the movie, and if you're watching the American theatrical version of it, there'll be a point, just stop it and then go to YouTube and watch the watch the original ending. But yeah, before we close out here, I know this is like the fifth outro I've done. I'm sorry, but we are closing out Scarathon 2022.
Yes.
And AC, we've been doing live streams every Friday night, all to benefit a great cause. And you've been watching a bunch of movies this year and raising money for RAP. So tell us what RAP is and how people can get involved.
It is the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, and they are an organization that provides financial assistance to women who are unable to afford safe, legal abortions and emergency contraceptives. Scarathon has been going all October long. We're in our final stretch. We've just passed the $5,000 mark, and we're pushing for 6. So please, the link that's in the description below. You can, a $5 donation makes a huge difference, and no amount is too large or too small. So please, if this cause is important to you, make a donation, and don't think that it's not enough, because $5 makes a difference to somebody.
Excellent. Well, thank you, AC. Thank you, Chad. It was great having you guys together. We should do, more of these, because it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, any parting words on The Descent?
I think no. I mean, I want everybody to see it. I was terrified that you hadn't seen it, and I was like, wait a minute, what? But anyway, yes. So I'm glad you've seen this, and I'm actually, what would be interesting is to do a Doomsday revisit, because I haven't seen that since the theater, and I remember being having thoughts about it, shall we say.
Yeah, we could do a whole Neil Marshall series, because aside from The Descent and Dog
Somebody
Soldiers,
needs to.
Well, these are the only two, I think, Neil Marshall things that I've seen.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd be totally down for that. So Chad, any parting words?
Yeah, I'm gonna close myself out with the tagline from the movie. It's the scariest movie in Earth.
Those clever marketeers.
Yeah, it's
All right.
one of like 6 taglines. So.
Really? All right. Well, thank you, guys. We'll catch you later. We'll do some more Neil Marshall talk sometime in the future. Love you both. And yeah, out there, thank you for watching. Please check out all my talented guest info in the description. If you like this show, please like and subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of this stuff all the time. So yeah, check it out. And for that, we are out, and I'm going to close this out with what the ladies say as they're taking the fun group photo before they go into the cave, which is sausages. Which is great, but still puzzling to me. Anyway, have a good night, guys. Thank you.